Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And we are closing in on the international amateur free agent signing period for this 2035 to 2036 offseason. Only about 2.5 days or 2.5 weeks away from that date. So probably not going to cover too much ground in this episode. Really going to just sim the next couple of weeks and then preview the players who are available in the IAFA pool and hopefully call on our worldwide scouting department to give us some ideas which direction we should potentially go there. We've been over the early stages of this offseason pursuing as many options as possible to improve our starting pitching. And we'll talk about a couple of pitching options that we're now looking at before we start moving forward. But before we do that, I want to respond to one other comment that came up recently, and it was from Peter Hooper, loyal viewer, who wondered what was going on with a couple of the guys who were once some of the top pitching prospects in our organization, and that's Jaheim Pennyman and Omari Raphael. They both are on our 40-man roster, but they both are unfortunately, I think, trending towards being replacement level type players. You may remember that Jaheim Pennyman, who we picked second overall in the 2028 draft, suffered a torn flexor tendon in his elbow in July of 2034. So he has missed the last year and a half. And that leaves him now as someone who's going to be 26 years old before the next season will start, who's pitched a total of 5 total games in the major leagues for us. The stuff in the movement are fine. Does have a 6-pitch arsenal, although 3 of those pitches are not particularly impressive. The concern with him is that his control looks like it's going to be well below average, and it doesn't really look like there's much potential to get it higher. Now, we do only have high scouting accuracy on him now because he was injured until very recently. So just for the fun of it, we will go and request an updated scouting report on him to get to very high accuracy, but not expecting anything to be materially different. Still making the major league minimum, 1 option year left for this upcoming season. He's certainly not the answer that we're looking for our starting rotation. If he looks a bit better coming out of spring training and performs well in AAA, and we have some injuries at the major league level, could he get another chance in the majors? Certainly. But I am not expecting him to be an impact player for us, unfortunately. And unfortunately, it's a not dissimilar story for Omari Raphael, who we picked 22nd overall out of Piedmont College in 2032. He was 12-7 in AAA for us last year with a 4.01 ERA. Struck out 9.2 batters per 9 innings, put up a 2.3 WAR. His ERA plus and his FIP minus were both above average, but the issue with Raphael, similar to Pennyman, is his poor control, and he walked 79 batters in just 155 innings. And he's also prone to the long ball, allowing 26 homers in those 155 innings. Still a 4 to 5 pitch guy. I'm pretty sure we do have him in the development lab for one last gasp at trying to, I believe, improve one of his off pitches. Unfortunately, when the development lab opened, I think Pennyman was still hurt. I don't know whether we would have put him in the development lab anyways. We did have Raphael in there working on secondary pitch improvement where he's on track. I thought we did get him into one of the massive number of 20 slots that we had available there. So maybe that means that his sinker, his fastball, one of those pitches gets a little better, maybe is a great result, and he realizes the last 5 to 10 points of upside. We think he's gotten his stuff from here, but similar to Penniman, I think Raphael is probably a guy who will begin the season in AAA most likely. I don't think he's the answer to what we need in the starting rotation, but he is another guy who, if we have some injuries or we get a little bit lucky with some talent change randomness, still could have a role for us down the line. Unfortunately, I don't think either of the roles that these players will fill for us will ultimately be what we had hoped when we picked them in the first rounds of their various drafts. Raphael positively does still have 3 option years left, so would expect with his profile that he'll probably a guy bouncing up and down between Vegas and Oakland for us over the next few years while he's making the major league minimum. And then once he hits the arbitration years, he'll likely be too expensive for us to want to keep around. Unless, as I said, maybe we get some luck in terms of his development. But otherwise, both of these guys are probably only with us until they are out of options. So 2 more pitchers that haven't worked out for us. We've really struggled developing guys with their control. I don't know whether any of you have kind of noted the same thing in OOTP 25, but that seems to be an area with a lot of our pitchers just aren't developing. And I guess maybe it's somewhat realistic because a lot of young pitchers never really do figure out how to control the plate at the major league level. But it's definitely been a frustration with some of the guys that we picked up and had coming through our system over the years. And as we think separately about how to improve our starting pitcher ERA, don't necessarily have any obvious options. We have made an offer to one pitcher who would be the first free agent we would sign this year. That's Chisen Harimoto, came over from Japan a few years ago, 33 years old. He's got 3 years of experience at the major league level now with the Mets, and he's been solid, 116 ERA plus and a 90 FIP minus over 95 and a third innings pitched. He's a solid lefty reliever, looking for $1.5 million a year. He's fragile in terms of his injury proneness. He is really a lefty specialist, but I feel like with that 75 stuff against lefties to go with above average movement and above average control, if we were able to use him as a specialist against lefties and then maybe just someone who could mop up some other innings, there could be value there. So we've made an offer to him considerably less than the $1.5 million that he's looking for a 1-year deal. We offered him a 3-year deal at $1 million a year, but the last 2 years of the offer that we made to him are team option years. So essentially it's a series of just 3 separate $1 million a year contracts. I don't think he's going to be a difference maker for us, but I do think as a lefty specialist for $1 million a year, he's worth putting into the mix in our bullpen. So we'll see whether or not the potential deal with Mr. Harimoto comes to fruition or not. And we've talked a lot in recent episodes, in the comments to recent episodes, in the interaction with the Worldwide Scouting Department about starting pitching being our primary focus for this offseason, but also the fact that the trade market just has not given us the type of answer that we're looking for, and the free agent market largely being not that appealing as well. That being said, the best pitcher, or the best starting pitcher on the free agent market this year remains there. And it's Spencer Strider, who still has excellent stuff, good movement and adequate control, 2 world-class pitches, a decent changeup, and a cutter. Solid stamina, solid at holding on runners. At 37 years old, still throws in the mid-90s with extreme ground ball tendencies. And he is at this point a 7-time All-Star who, over the course of his career with the Braves and the Yankees, has put up a 1.30 ERA plus and a 75 FIP minus. The obvious issue with Mr. Strider is that he is 37 years old. He's wrecked physically, and he's looking for $28.4 million a season. And when we look back at what he's done over the past 9 years in the majors, he's pitched 29 or more starts just 3 times in the last 9 years. Interestingly, the 32 starts he made last year for the Yankees are the most that he had in over a decade. Have to go all the way back to 2024, fictional 2024, with the Braves to find him starting more than those 32 games. And his 14 wins this past year with the Yankees were the most he's had in over a decade as well. I feel like we've been able to manage fragile pitchers pretty well through this playthrough with the quick tiredness hook and pitch counts. Wrecked is a whole different level. There's no doubt about it. And you can see that there have been 2 times in the last 9 years where he's started only 8 games in the majors over a course of a season. So there's definitely risk with him. But interestingly, when you look at his ERA plus and his FIP minus, even though he's had minimal action in many recent seasons, he's always been an above average pitcher when he has taken the mound. So there's certainly no guarantees with a 37-year-old, certainly no guarantees with a wrecked player. But he's still somebody that we're at least investigating, because although the contract demand of $28.4 million is ridiculous, he did drop it down to a 3-year offer. He was looking for 5 years earlier. So he's getting a little more realistic with where he is at this point, only looking for 3 years. And we did offer him a 3-year major league contract with an average salary of $25 million. So not really too far off from what he was looking for. Unfortunately, we structured that in a way that would work perfectly for us with a little less than $16 million available for free agents. It was going to be $15 million in this upcoming 2036 season, followed by a team option for $30 million that we would presumably decline, and then a vesting option for $30 million for the 3rd year that presumably would not be relevant because we would have already declined the 2nd year option. But Mr. Strider, being a smart man, clearly saw through that effectively. It was a 1-year, $18 million deal that we were willing to give him. And he said we're not quite good enough. I don't know how much more I want to stretch to try to get him. I am going to come back with another offer that's a little bit higher for this upcoming year. I don't think the structure is really going to work for him, but I'll try to make it a little more palatable. To do that, we're going to have to cut a little bit out of our postseason budget for player development or scouting, but that's not the end of the world. So we're going to offer him a 3-year deal that could potentially be worth $84.3 million. So honestly, not far off of what he's looking for, but clearly the structure is going to be what he objects to. Because although we've raised the yearly numbers by $3 million each to add another $9 million into this contract for him. It still is essentially a 1 year, $21.3 million deal, assuming that we would do the buyout this upcoming off season. We're going to include the no trade clause. That'll make it slightly more palatable to him. Honestly, if he works out and is pitching well and healthy and the team is doing well, we wouldn't want to trade him anyways because it would have kind of worked out. And if he ends up injured, he is a guy who, with that contract, is going to basically be untradeable anyways, and we would just suck it up in terms of the money that we wasted on him this upcoming season and then move on. I don't think he's going to go for this. It's certainly a better deal than the one we offered him before, but I don't think it's going to get the job done right now. If this doesn't work out, I'll continue perusing the trade market over the next several months, and we could certainly re-engage with Strider in a month and a half if nothing materializes the way that he's hoping it will. But barring a trade or getting something done with Strider, at this point, I think I'm inclined to just go into next season with a fair amount of available cash, and hopefully there will be somebody next June or July who's in the final year of a contract that's a good, solid starting pitcher that a team is willing to trade that we can attract. A benefit of Strider is that it's only money and it's not draft prospects. It's only a 1 year commitment. And he's also a reasonably popular guy who could help us pick back some of the brutal 6 points that we lost in fan interest by our brief rental of Luis Lujan. Again, I don't think this is going to be good enough that he's going to go for it, but even though it's more money than we offered him before, I think there's a decent chance we can get 25 plus games out of him by managing him conservatively. And I think 25 plus games out of Spencer Strider will be an upgrade for our rotation and also hopefully help position us to get back into the playoffs next year. Ooh, I guess my team options were not quite enough there. Yeah, and he's still not interested. He's actually raised his demand to $29.5 million over 3 years. Doesn't like the structure. Basically wants 2 years that are a bit front-loaded, guaranteed, and then a potential vesting option for his age 39 season. I'm gonna be patient. If Strider lingers on the market into the future, I may re-engage with him. If you think that's a great idea, or if you think that's crazy. Always helpful for me to hear from the worldwide scouting department, but we haven't made any decisions yet. But the fact that he's gone from 5 years to 3 made it a little bit more interesting to me. But quite honestly, unless we can essentially turn it into a 1 year deal, I don't think it's wise for us to make a more significant commitment than that to a player who's 37 years old and wrecked. And Juan Ramos, who missed all of last year, even though we traded for him in a big deal with Seattle, is now finally healthy. You can see we've only got low scouting accuracy on him because he hasn't played in the major leagues in over a year. Hoping that his scouting report comes back and he looks pretty similar to what we think he is. He's fragile, he's slow, he's an awful bunter, he's not good defensively. He's only after the money, and he's not that loyal, but he is a potentially excellent left-handed bat. And simply because of that bat, we brought him on board. So the hope is that 90% plus of what we think he is still is there after that long injury. And unfortunately, the dream of bringing Spencer Strider on board is finished. He's staying in New York, but he's going from the Yankees to the Mets. He did get 3 years, not quite the money that he was looking for, but still 3 years, $74.8 million, 2 years, and $52 million of it guaranteed. So that to me was not an offer that I would have made to him given our budgetary constraints. Doesn't look like he'd consider a trade to us. So I feel good that we at least made an offer to him that would have worked really well for us. It stinks that we're going to basically likely go through this entire off season and not really be able to address the starting pitching in the way that we wanted to, but we will have money available when we get into next season. And at some point, somebody probably will be a seller on starting pitching, and there should be options out there if we need it. It'll give us an option or the ability to kind of see what one of the top young prospects in our organization looks like. And that would be the minor league pitcher Doug Weiss, who we have penciled in for a spot in the rotation next year. Probably will give Jamie DeVore, who was demoted from the rotation, an opportunity to compete for the 4th or 5th spot. Bobby Garland will also be in the mix. We've got Ferris, Patterson, and DeCaro kind of set, I think, in those top 3 spots. But between Garland, DeVore, the 2 youngsters that we talked about in Penniman and Raphael, and more realistically Doug Weiss, we certainly have arms that can fill those 4th and 5 roles for us. The hope is Weiss becomes more than a 4th starter and a real solid contributor to the rotation. If he does that, that'll be a big step forward for us. And if things don't work out with the Garlands and DeVores and Raphaels and Pennymans of the world, who likely will be competing for that 5th spot, we'll have the opportunity to try to make a trade as the season moves along. And we're certainly not going to give up on trying to make a trade for a starting pitcher this offseason, but I'm not expecting the high prices that teams are looking for in trade to all of a sudden become bargain basement levels as we get closer to the actual start of the season. We did get the scouting report back on Juan Ramos, up to very high scouting accuracy with him, and the bat pretty much looks like it looked before. The ceiling on his power is not quite as high as we thought it was, but he is still a guy with not completely even splits, but a guy who we think can be an excellent bat against right-handed pitching and certainly still be in the lineup against left-handed pitching. Likely to be our DH this upcoming year, but think he could still be a big contributor for us over the next few seasons, hopefully. And then we also did get our updated report on Jaheim Pennyman coming back from that long injury. The control still not great. And unfortunately, I don't think his movement is as good as it was before we got to the very high scouting accuracy on him. So I think if we have injuries, he'll probably get an opportunity in the majors this year. But unfortunately, I'm not looking at Mr. Pennyman as anything more than a 4A replacement level guy for us this upcoming season. And quite honestly, once his options are gone, he probably will be no longer a member of the A's organization a year from now. And we've continued moving along. We're just over a week away from the beginning of the IAFA signing period. We ran our last scouting camp a few days ago. Still trying to pull together some final scouting reports on some of the players to ensure that we've got the highest accuracy possible for as many different players that we're thinking about. So a week from now, we'll finish up the episode with a review of some of the top candidates for us to try to bring on board. Still haven't heard anything from Chasen Harimoto on that offer that we made to him, which probably is an indication that he's not all that excited about it, trying to continue to play the market. But similar to the Strider deal, I think the structure of this deal is very favorable to us. If we can add Harimoto as a left-handed specialist, I think it's a relatively low-risk way for us to do that if he agrees to this contract. And if he gets more money from somebody else, good for you, Chisen Harimoto. And we did just get an offer of an interesting pitcher, 27-year-old starter Sergio Compos, a two-time All-Star, the Kansas Cyclone, even though he's from Peoria, Arizona. Second pick overall in 2030 out of Colorado Mesa University. Average stuff, well above average movement, average control. 4-pitch arsenal, although really only the fastball is a big-time pitch. He's fragile physically, making $13.2 million this year, a little over $16 next year. As we noted, a two-time All-Star in his 4 seasons, 86 fit minus, so he's been a pretty solid pitcher, basically a 3 to 4 WAR pitcher over the past 4 seasons. So certainly some value there. He's also a fan favorite, well-known nationally. Not sure how much of a bump we'd get in fan interest if we brought him on board. Unfortunately, the guy they're willing to trade him for is Kevin Patterson, the pitcher that we traded for from Miami last season, right before the trade deadline, who we have penciled in as our number 2 starter next year, even though we'd feel much better if he were a 3 or a 4. On Patterson, we did sign to a very reasonable extension this past, just a couple months ago at the beginning of this current offseason. So I don't think that's a deal that we would make straight up. I think Compos is a bit better than Patterson, but he's making a lot more money. He's fragile physically, and he's likely only ours for a couple of years. As we've seen with most pitchers, I'm expecting the actual trade options for Compos to be relatively meager. Actually, more players than I expected that would make this work now, but it is the top players on our team or the top prospects across our organization that would make it work, given the money that Compos is making and the fact that he's likely only ours for another 2 years. I think I'll keep an eye on him. I don't want to rule it out, but right now I don't know that I'm willing to give up one of the real blue chip prospects in our organization or one of the top players on our major league team. Shiloh Solis, at least according to the perfected star ratings potential, is the lowest rated guy out there, but he's the number 67 prospect in baseball and still a guy who we think could be a interesting major leaguer, switch hitting, respectable infielder. If they were willing to keep a really big chunk of Compos' contract, that would at least give me something to think about. But there's options there. I mean, if they keep 80% of Compos' contract, if you guys have thoughts on this one, I'd love to hear them. I doubt that Compos is going to be dealt somewhere else over the next week or so until we get to the IAFA period in the end of the episode. I don't conceptually love giving up a top 100 prospect that we spent a 10th overall pick on, but being realistic, Solis is a guy who's spent the last year and a half plus in high A and has been a below average offensive player both times. He's versatile defensively, but not necessarily great defensively. in the bat is still a question. If he reaches his full potential, it's an interesting bat for a middle infielder as a switch hitter, but at almost 23 years old, what's the chance that he reaches his full potential? And there are some guys that we could include in the trade to get it done and have them include a really big chunk of the contract. I know these guys pretty well. I think if I was going to throw one in, it would be Mr. Alfaro, Luis Alfaro, third baseman, not a big-time hitting prospect. We could include Alfaro and Solis, and they'd keep 85% of his contract next year. So we'd have Compos for just a couple $1 million next year, or actually this year, more accurately. But then we would be on the line to be spending $16 million-ish on him to keep him in his final arbitration-eligible season, when we're already in a situation where, when we think about our finances, we don't have any money to spend next year, and we'd be adding another $16 million into the mix. So I think in terms of the offers and the demands that we've seen for starting pitchers this offseason, Compos is one of the more reasonable offers that I've seen. I just don't know if he's enough of a difference maker compared to the likes of DeVore and Garland, who would likely be competing with him for that number 5 spot. Obviously, if we brought Compos on board, he would be the number 4 or 5 guy, along with Weiss. But Weiss at this point is penciled into the 4 spot, and I just don't think that Compos, for what we have to give up, is enough of an upgrade over DeVore or Garland. But I'm willing to hear other opinions on that. As I said, Compos is a 2-time All-Star in 4+ years in the majors, so he's clearly doing something well over the course of his career. Given that he's really just a 2-year guy for us, though, I don't know if he's enough of a difference maker to make sense to pursue this deal. But the worldwide scouting department has helped me with decisions like this in the past. So in addition to your thoughts on the IAFA pool, if you've got thoughts on Compos for Solis straight up, or Compos for Solis and Alfaro, and we let the Tigers retain a lot of Compos contract, let me know. I guess the other thing that we should look at to scope things out is, if we just traded them Solis, how much of the contract are they willing to keep there? Yeah, and I mean, they're willing to keep 60% of his contract just for Solis straight up, so that could be another option for us to consider as well. And as the IAFA period gets underway, Krisen Harimoto has finally let us know what he's thinking about 2.5 weeks after he made him the offer. He's being honest. He's still waiting to see if anyone will make him a better offer, but he says he's leaning for it right now. So I think as a lefty specialist, there's value there in the optionality with the way we've structured the proposed deal to Harimoto. And we've had 10 players that we've brought into the last 2 camps. Was a slightly different group for the first 2 camps that we did, although a lot of crossover. I think 8 of these 10 guys that we're going to be talking about have been to all 4 of our camps. We generally try to spend the most time and the most resources on the highest end prospects, get to know them with very high scouting accuracy, and hopefully make as good a decision as we can with whatever player or players we're going to be spending the preponderance of the $5.7 million that we've got to spend on, and then we will fill in the gaps with guys that we don't know as well. So 3 pitchers kind of made the cut for us this year. starting pitching prospect Luis Wolverine Picon, 17-year-old out of the Dominican. I think his stuff and his movement are both pretty average, potentially outstanding control, though. Only a 3-pitch arsenal if everything works out. Does have really good stamina, high adaptability, and work ethic. Interesting prospect at $2.8 million. I don't think that's the direction we're likely to go, but view him as one of the better pitching prospects out there, which is why we've had him in camp. David Tienda, another 17-year-old who had his birthday yesterday. Happy birthday to Blue Tienda. Out of Venezuela. Think his stuff, his movement, and his control could all be well above average, but he's got a lot of work to do to improve as far as the walks and not giving up the long ball. A guy who could have a 3 or 4 pitch arsenal if everything works out. High adaptability and work ethic, throws in the low 90s. He's a finesse pitcher, decent stamina, not great at holding on runners, but I like Blue Tienda just because he's got a higher ceiling, a bit more than Picon. He's also looking for less money at $2.4 million. Supposedly very easy for us to sign. Certainly would prioritize him over Mr. Picon, but we haven't talked yet about Jorge Galicia, dual Dominican and Spanish nationality for Blower Galicia. 16-year-old, throws a bit harder than the others, already reaching the mid-90s. Ground baller pitcher type with ground ball tendencies. Excellent stamina, although another guy who's not great at holding on runners. We think his stuff, his movement, and his control could all be well above average, although as with just about any 16-year-old, he's got a lot of work to do in all of those categories. And another guy with a potential 4-pitch arsenal if everything worked out. If we were going to go with a pitcher, to me, it's Galicia or Tienda. Clearly, if we go for Galicia, he's going to be the prize and the primary target. I guess there is a chance with Tienda looking for $2.4 million that if there's another position player that we happen to like who's looking for in that $2.5 million range, we could try to get creative and pair Tienda with another player. I don't think that's going to be practical if we go with Galicia, though. I think if we go with him, we're just going to have to decide that he's the guy and then do everything in our power to bring him on board. But we don't necessarily have to go with a pitcher, as there are about 90 some odd position players, including 7 that we had in our most recent camp for us to think about as well. Juan Ramos and Jorge Guerra are 2 of the guys that we've swapped in and out. Guerra was in the first 2 camps. Romero was in the second 2 camps. Only got up to high scouting accuracy on both of them. They're actually both looking for $2 million. Guerra is a guy that we moved on from. I think he's fine. A nice batting profile if he reaches his full potential, but not an incredible batting profile. Decent speed, competent defensively, nothing special as far as his personality. So I just don't know that he's a guy who's going to really reach his full potential. So we did, as I noted, move on to a guy with some better personality traits who's looking for similar money in the last couple of camps, and that's the second baseman, Juan Ramos. Pretty similar batting profile, quite honestly. A little more potential gap power, a little better speed, but a guy who is not all that special defensively. Would certainly need to have some positive results in the development lab with Mr. Romero to make him playable at anywhere besides first base. He is a guy who looks like he could play left field in a pinch as well, but the hope would be that maybe you could improve some of those ratings a bit and get him a little bit more versatile. Romero is a guy who's looking for $2 million, does have the type of price tag if we wanted to try to go for 2 guys that we like a lot, could fit in well with Tienda. I don't think that would necessarily work with Mr. Galicia. And then the other 6 guys that we've had into camp, 5 of them are 5-star potential prospects, and one of them is a 4.5-star potential prospect. Jorge Carreno, 16-year-old flamethrower Carreno out of Venezuela. Looks like he could be a pretty good hitting third baseman if he reaches his full potential. Kind of a typical third baseman profile in terms of average range, but a pretty good arm. Think he's an interesting player at a $2.6 million price tag. I don't know that's the direction we'll end up going. He also doesn't really have anything special in terms of his personality to make us feel a little better about him reaching his true potential. And then 5 of the most interesting guys to talk about are the 5-star everyday prospects. And there's a lot of variety here. Got guys like Quezada and Ramirez only looking for around $2 million. Rocha, Soenga, and Ortega are all looking for closer to $3 million. So there are guys who we could blend in if we wanted to with the pitcher Tienda. If we wanted to try to go for 2 guys, but just going for Galicia, if we end up thinking he's the top pitching prospect, is also an option. Bellarmino Soenga looking for $3 million. El Chato, a right fielder who we think could have outstanding home run power. Other than that, nothing all that exciting about him. He's got a lot of work to do in terms of making contact with the ball and avoiding strikeouts. Given his price tag, I don't think he's the direction I'm going to go, but obviously I'll be spending a lot more time on this offline, thinking things through and the possible permutations, and also giving the worldwide scouting department time to provide me with some guidance as well. $3.2 million center fielder Mauricio Rocha has the highest price tag of any of these IAFA position players we're going to be talking about. Potentially really good contact with well above average home run power is an interesting combination. Average speed, average defensively. Solid prospect, but with no real positive personality traits and that pretty high price tag. Probably not the direction I'd be inclined to go. Juan Ramirez at $2.2 million is a guy who could potentially fit in with Tienda if we wanted to try to be bold and maybe lock up 2 top prospects. Ramirez, a right fielder, very well balanced hitting profile, but potentially exceptional power, although he's got a lot of work to develop that as a 16-year-old. Durable, which I like, does have a high work ethic. The fielding and the speed aren't great, but the fielding in particular could be more than acceptable, particularly if he gets a little bit of positive development. So I don't hate Juan Ramirez. Daniel Quezada at $1.9 million is looking for the least of any of these guys. Interesting, supposedly all 5 of the 5-star potential prospects are going to be very easy for us to sign, but that's not always accurate and doesn't always work out in these IAFA bidding wars. Quezada, a 16-year-old out of Nicaragua, and he only turned 16 a month and a half ago, so he is one of the younger players in this pool. Competent-ish defensively, probably more of a natural third baseman than anything else. Could certainly also play first base and could also play a competent corner outfield. So he's at least versatile defensively, potential really good contact hitter who could be above average at everything if he fully develops. Not a ton of speed, does have high adaptability and intelligence. Interesting prospect. And then the final 5-star prospect looking for $2.8 million is the shortstop Juan Ortega, 17-year-old out of Venezuela. Looks competent defensively, does have high adaptability and work ethic, but that does go with low leadership. Pretty average as far as his speed. Really is kind of a first baseman right now, although he's listed as a shortstop. But with that defensive profile in the development lab, certainly think we could get him to be a respectable second or third baseman and a guy that could play shortstop in a pinch. Potentially has borderline outstanding contact, with above average power, well above average power, and above average gap power and eye if he fully developed. The if he fully developed is always the big question with any of these youngsters, particularly the IAFA guys who are a year or two younger than even the players in the college draft. So there's some interesting players out there. I can't say I've got incredibly strong opinions on anybody. If I had to give you my first reaction, I think I might try to get cute and try to peer Tienda at $2.4 million, maybe with a guy like Ramirez, looking for $2.2 million, so $4.6 between the both of them. Give an extra $500,000 to Ramirez, give an extra $600,000 to Tienda, and just put the $5.7 million out there right away and try to get two guys that you really like signed. Quezada is interesting to me as well, and I think with him looking for $300,000 less than Ramirez, that could work as well. Again, I haven't spent a ton of time with this. I'll spend more on it between now and the next episode, and also will be anxiously awaiting any members of the Worldwide Scouting Department who would like to turn in a scouting report. But if I had to make a decision right this second, I think I would go after Quezada or Ramirez with Tienda. Kind of do the move that we've done a few times in the past where we offer them both kind of as much as we can over what they're looking for, to spend the whole $5.7 million up front and try to go for a huge high-end, high-ceiling result in the IAFA period with two guys that we think are really high-potential players. So Tienda with Quezada and Ramirez is probably what I would do if I was only going to make the decision off of the last 10 minutes or so that we've spent looking at these guys together. But fortunately, I don't have to make that decision immediately. And as I said, appreciate the thoughts from anyone who's willing to share your views on what you would do if you were in my situation. So a lot to think about in terms of the IAFA pool, as well as the trade proposal that we received. We'll still find out, hopefully, what happens with Chisin Harimoto in the next episode. And, if you've got thoughts on what we tried to do with Spencer Strider, whether maybe we perhaps should have been a little bit more aggressive with him, would love some analysis on that as well. And obviously, if you've got some thoughts on the Compos for Solis trade, would love to hear what you think of the Kansas Cyclone as well. So we've got a big task list for the Worldwide Scouting Department between now and the next episode, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on what we've done and what we should do, as always. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.